The Germans were coming down N13 from Cherbourg and came toward the La Barquette's locks. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the rattle of the tin cans. I told them just start firing. So we got one. After he was wounded, he stayed there and gurgled and howled and did make all kinds of noises for the most part. So the sound of a dying man will stop all conversation. So it was very quiet there for a long period of time. And so George Zebrowski, he couldn't stand the quietness and the noise that this German was making. And he wanted to go out and finish him off. So I said, okay, but be very careful. He may set up a trap for you. And this is all a fake activity that's going on. And he's luring you out there to get you. Well, that wasn't the case. George finished him off, and we brought the German in the morning, and we dug a trench for him and put him under the apple tree, and I cut 2 branches and made a Christian cross, and I took his identification, sent it to battalion.
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
To meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
My father was in the United States Navy, oriented toward aviation chief machinist mate, and he was killed in Panama Canal Zone in an accident with an aircraft at 300 feet in a power dive, and the ensign under control of the aircraft, a great big P-3T torpedo bomber that slung a torpedo between the 2 pontoons, went into a dive and they couldn't get it out of it. So it was a heavy-duty accident in 60 feet of water in the Bay of Panama.
And how old were you when that happened?
Probably 12.
When did you join the service, sir?
1942.
And why did you choose the Army?
Because I didn't like the Navy. And because they paid us extra money for jumping, and it was also stupid intelligence.
So you went to training at Camp Toccoa, correct?
Right.
What was that like?
It was a total and complete orientation, turned us inside out. Imagine a young lad like me coming from a salubrious climate in Southern California to a cold winter. That was tough on me as a training. So we trained for 13 weeks in Camp Toccoa in phases A, B, C, and D. We were so in Toccoa, we were so physically fit after the 13 weeks that nobody would fool around with us.
Then you also did some training at Fort Benning, right?
Yeah, we continued our training at Fort Benning under A, B, C, and D again, but more advanced. And in the physical training that we'd do something wrong on purpose in the physical training, and the instructors would come over and chew us out upside down and give us 25 more push-ups, and we would dumbfounded by saying or asking, "Which arm, Sergeant?"
Did that just make them angrier?
Oh, boy, did they. They boiled over.
So, well, soon you were commanding a combat paratrooper group, right?
Yes.
And serving as a platoon sergeant, so what did those jobs require?
Diligence, awareness, compassion, some intelligence, creativity, everything that I needed that I had a little bit of, because I came from a city that was oriented toward naval aviation, and most of the officers in Coronado were from major on up to general. And so I was aware of all of that and then got some training.
Well, let's talk about D-Day now. Describe your flight across the channel and your jump.
We didn't put engine exhaust on our faces, nor did we cut our hair Mohawk style. Some of the guys did and got away with it. The officers didn't like it, but too late, Lieutenant. You don't like it, you can glue it back on. So we looked like some of the guys looked like a bunch of Mohawk Indians, you know. But we didn't go into combat yelling and screaming, although we went in with assault fire. So we loaded up and waited and waited and unloaded and loaded again, and then number 18 man mounts and ladder and goes in. There was 18 jumpers in the aircraft, and I was number one. I've always jumped number one. We had the bundles now secured under the belly of the aircraft. We had one bundle of 300 pounds in the doorway after I got in. Now, each of the bundles under the belly of the aircraft was 300 pounds. Now, there's 1,800 pounds of weight there. So we're oriented, and 8:41 English double summertime, we went to our aircraft. I should have mentioned that before. We took off an hour or so later. All right, we took off, and it's in Section 16. It was 45 aircraft in groups of threes. So the entire group was assembled at 5,000 feet and flew toward Portsmouth, Portland Bill. That was a code name for Portsmouth on the western coast of England, and then dropped down to 1,500 feet to get under the German radar. Now, there were two submarines in the one in the English Channel that gave us a signal and said we're okay, and there was another one in the Gulf of Aqaba where we would turn right or left depending upon what the signal was and if we were on the correct azimuth. So at 1,500 feet, we turned left at the second submarine signal, and I was in the door looking out, and I could see that the community, it was low tide, and the Rideau River was flowing low, and its tributaries were also moving all of its water toward the English Channel. The jump altitude was 750. We had all our bundles in place. Everybody stood up and hooked up and did all the necessary checkouts that were required for the jump. Lieutenant jump check number 18, Van Buskirk, and went up to where I was, and everyone said everything is okay. And Lieutenant Jansen told me that get ready to go. And when the light went on above the doorway, there was three lights, a red, a green, and a white one. In flight, we got white on. In jump time, we have 8 minutes from the time the white light goes out to the red light goes on, and the red light stays on that long. At the end of the 8 minutes, then the green light goes on, and out we go. So we had a bundle in front of us. We got rid of that one without any trouble. And I could see out the door that we were headed right for a rectangle of anti-aircraft and machine gun fire of various colors that you would imagine would exist and you would view in 4th of July. So the Section 16 broke up, and it swung off to the right. So we're all standing, swishy and bouncing around, 18 guys standing in a runway in an aircraft. That's a tough job.
Those of us who appreciate history know that small decisions made today can have huge impacts down the road. For our own lives, no decision is more impactful than how we choose to invest in our kids' future. That's why I'm proud to introduce this week's sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. As a busy parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future. But where to start? Fabric by Gerber Life makes it easy for you to set up an investment account that grows with them, helping to prepare their financial success and security. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the Kids Investment Account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. It's all online, takes minutes to set up, and you can start to invest with as little as $1 a day. There are no contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, and they're SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, there's no commission fees, just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. It's a fantastic way to secure your child's financial future, one step at a time, with Fabric and Gerber Life, a name trusted by millions of families for more than 50 years. Join the thousands of parents and grandparents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/AVC. That's MEET, fabric.com/AVC. AVC is proud to partner with Fabric by Gerber Life in investing in our children and our country's future.
So the green light goes on, and just as we swung away, I was almost pitched out the door, but I made the jump in a proper manner. but my left arm got caught in the lower left-hand corner of the door as I clamped down real tight. And I swung out, came back and hit the side of the aircraft. The rest of the guys are going underneath me. And I swung out again and straightened my arm, and I got loose. But what happened was that number 2 and number 3 man, Frank Figueroa and Tony Doss, had instruments that would release the bundles, and they did it prematurely. So we weren't on drop zone B. That was underwater. We were over on drop zone D. So the bundles went away. I crouched on a lower level, and I went out the door and got caught, like I said, and got loose. And I think I jumped about 500 feet or less and made 2 oscillations because the atmosphere was kind of damp and there wasn't enough, the hole in the parachute, the apex vent collar wasn't big enough to take care of that spillage of air. So 2 oscillations and I hit the ground. I weighed 286 pounds. Normal weight was 137. The rest of it was military bric-a-brac. And then I rolled with a right arm out in front of me and didn't break anything. I was still in good shape, and I couldn't get out of the harness because my musette bag came up in front of my face, and the reserve parachute pushed it up and kept it up. So I undid the zipper on my jump jacket right under my chin and started to cut my way loose, and Tony and Frank Figueroa came up with the mortar. And so we assembled there and crossed a little canal, and we used the cricket. You know about the cricket?
Yes.
Okay. So we clicked on that and listened. And we got 2 clicks, and we listened. And pretty soon we had 5 clicks, and these guys that were clicking for us were maybe 5 or 6 feet from us. I recognized their physical feature. I knew they were in our aircraft because of the way they talked and the stuff they were carrying. So one of them said he had a hand grenade with a pin pulled, and once you get the pin pulled, you can't put it back, and whether you had it or not, I don't know, but I said, give me the grenade, and everybody down. I rolled over and dropped it in a canal and rolled back. In 5 seconds, it exploded. So we broke up into groups of 3 and started looking for our bundles. They were in the trees, they were in the swamps, they were in the river, they were everywhere. Some lights were on, some lights were not. So we gathered what we could, and we met as a group of about 30 guys under Major Allen in good formation, and dropped all of our equipment except our weapons and ammunition, and now we're marching on to battle. And so we found it at a little place called Penemy near the La Barquette Locks. Colonel Johnson was thereabouts, rounding up guys as best he could, and he had about 50 of them, so they joined us. And we set up a blockade for some Germans that we were aware of. Now, the 6th German Infantry Regiment was having a party on June 5th. One group was in Carenton, which is maybe a couple of 100 feet above the Drew River, and another group was in Utah Beach, because they expected what they were told that there's going to be a landing. And the third one was, for the most part, in Perrier. They were observing, especially the Germans in Carenton were looking down upon us, and they saw all this group of Germans coming toward us and Americans wandering around down there, and they were confused because of their myopic vision, and they just waited. When Colonel Johnson got there, they recognized that the Americans are here, and Colonel Johnson took 2 German-speaking GIs and went out to the colonel and the German regiment after they hit the ground and told the German colonel it's time to surrender. Well, he laughed that one off, and Colonel Johnson and the 2 GIs walked back, and they were fired upon. They got back okay. Half an hour later, they went out again with a bed sheet and told them that they were going to have a truce, and we'll pick up your wounded. So mount your bayonets on your rifles, jab them into the ground, put your helmets on the butt end of your rifle, we'll come out and pick you up. So we did that. In the meantime, there was artillery called in from the USS Quincy, which was out in the English Channel, because the officer that was a fire captain on the Quincy was good friends with another individual, an officer that dealt with firepower. I was right next to him on the road, and I heard all his conversation with the USS Quincy, so they played the baseball game to try to identify each other. So everything was satisfied, and 3 shells came in. One was long, one was short, and the other was right on. And the shell that was right on was an 18-incher from a cruiser, current USS Quincy, and it howled and whistled. So if I could have, I was probably scared enough that I could have gotten into my helmet, but that was too small. So it exploded, and we moved out from there and more toward La Barquette Locks, and I set up a trap for Germans there the day of June 6th, and put in steel rods into the ground very low, about 1 foot above the ground, wired it from one stake to the other, and put tin cans and bolts and nuts in them, and told each one of the guys we're not going in the lock keeper's house, because that they could fire it and kill us and get us into real difficulty. So we stayed out in the garden area where the apple orchards and farm produce was. I assigned them, each of them, George Zeborowski and Tony Doss, a fire sector. And I took a fire sector, and I was in a corner. And the Germans were coming down N13 from Cherbourg, passed through the city just above St. Marie de Mont, and came toward the La Barquette Locks. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the rattle of the tin cans. So I told them, if you hear anything, since we tied parachute cords to our wrists, and if you want to go to sleep, okay, but I doubt if you will, because you're so overpowered with anxiety that you'll stay awake. We heard the rattle. I told them just start firing. So we got one German we killed. I don't know whether he was a deserter or a scout or what his position was, but in the morning, after he was wounded, he stayed there and gurgled and howled and did make all kinds of noises for the most part. So the sound of a dying man will stop all conversation. So it was very quiet there for a long period of time. And so George Zeborowski, he couldn't stand the quietness and the noise that this German was making, and he wanted to go out and finish him off. So I said, okay, but be very careful. He may set up a trap for you, and this is all a fake activity that's going on, and he's luring you out there to get you. Well, that wasn't the case. George finished him off, and we brought the German in the morning, and we dug a trench for him and put him under the apple tree, and I cut 2 branches and made a Christian cross, and I took his identification, sent it to battalion in the paragraph.
You were actually injured in Normandy, and you had some recuperation time, but you were well enough to make the jump into Holland. So tell us what you did.
I got some superficial wounds in Normandy. I walked past a window, and a sniper saw me and fired, and I stepped right into his bullet as it hit the floor and bounced up and stuck in my just above my knee. So I pulled my pant leg out and pulled it out and put it in my pocket, and I got hit with shrapnel. I didn't bother going to medics. That was superfluous. I had other more important things to do, and it wasn't a wild ass wound anyway. And so we assembled, and we fought for 37 days in Normandy after the 1st and the 24th Infantry moved through us and cleaned up Normandy. And the Battle of Carenton took 4 days, and after 37 days of fighting there, we went back to England, and we had 38% casualties. On the basis of that, we started receiving replacements, and they didn't work out too well at first because they represented someone had been killed, wounded, disappeared, or AWOL, or whatever happened to them. So there was a lot of talk, and they heard the stories that people that they represented. So they were a little bit uneasy, and it took a while, about maybe 6 to 8 weeks to get them oriented properly in a lot of exercises. So we had 18 parachute jumps put in front of us because the infantry was not moving on the continental mainland. Every time we went to an airport, they issued us ammunition, but no foodstuffs. Or if it wasn't foodstuffs that we got, we didn't get ammunition, so I knew we weren't going to go. But September 17th, the issue came with food, K rations, and ammunition. So it was go. And we took off at 1:31 p.m. Sunday, September 17th, and flew a lower route to Brabant, and intercepted a highway and flew up the highway to Veghel. We were to hold key bridges, railroad intersections, and sections of the road so that the British 30th Corps could move through us real fast. We missed the drop zone A and caught A1, which was tangent to A, and we had a nice jump there. Instead of me floating down like an apple blossom and a pear blossom, I was going up because I got caught in a thermal of some of the aircraft that were below us and above us. So I had to sweat it out and just wandered. So about 300 feet or so, I recognized a good place to land. But it was unfortunate. It was as I got lower, it became more defined to me, and it was the kitchen of a Dutch house, and I didn't want to end up in the kitchen. So luckily I steered away, and by pulling the risers, and I landed in a garden that was surrounded by a steel picket fence, and that was the worst scary thing, that I'd again stabbed and hung up on a steel picket fence. My stub machine gun got jammed in the dirt, and I made a standing landing, but I couldn't clean it because I didn't have time for that. So we got out on the road, and I ran about 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles per total distance, and through a little community called Driel, and people were giving us gingerbread and Calvados and all kinds of crazy stuff that we didn't need, but we were still hungry because of the anxiety that overtook us. We got into the center city of Veghel, and I think everybody in town was in that city center, and one woman came up to me and asked me how many Americans were there. I said 50,000, because obviously she was a spy, and we set up a defense on Veghel, and the highway from our drop zone toward Veghel was a good paved highway, and parallel to it and going in the same direction was a river, AA, and between those two there was a lot of land area, brushes and trees, and to the northern end of that section outside of Veghel, 10 kilometers away, was St. Odin Road. It was a German parachute training camp, and they were pretty active. So they were alerted, and they came down between the River and the highway to Veghel. We let them go by, and our platoon, 3rd Platoon, for the most part under platoon leader William D. Huff, was given the instructions to make his way back up to the drop zone and spout and find out what's going on up there and where the Germans are. He did, and he contacted a Dutch man on a bicycle, and he rode about a half a mile ahead of him, and would observe what's going on, then come back and tell the Huff what was ahead of him. So we let them come up to us and fired upon them. So we had a good firefight there, and we got behind the first group of Germans that came in from the parachute landing school, and they were facing Company A and B between the River and the Veghel Highway. They were the brooms, and Company C was the dustpan. and we were behind them, and A and B swept up that section of land between those 2 points that I just mentioned, and back the Germans up into us. We captured 400 of them. What the devil are we going to do with 400 Germans? We're 65 miles behind German lines. So as we took them over, I think we turned some of them over to some of the glider pilots, and they took care of them. Outside of that, I don't know what happened to them.
As winter began in December of 1944, the Germans began their massive counteroffensive known as the Battle of the Bulge, and of course the 101st was brought to defend Bastogne. What was your role there?
The 82nd was the first to defend Bastogne. That was their objective. They moved out ahead of us. The 116th Infantry Division was in a rest area near the Bastogne region, and they were hit pretty hard. So they moved away from their adversaries as quickly as they could, and they came through Bastogne, and they saw us going in one direction, the opposite that they were going, and they were yelling, "They're coming, they're coming." And they were dragging their equipment, and they had little if any ammunition and not many rifles, so we took over whatever they could and willing to give us, because we had furloughs of 5 or 6 days after Market Garden to selected points, and we were called right back to our campgrounds in Marmelon, France, Marmelon-le-Grand and Marmelon-le-Petit, and then assembled out at 4 o'clock in the morning and trucked into Bastogne. So we came in with quietude as possible, and ran through the 116th Division and on out. We got moved in the wrong direction toward Warden, and the Lieutenant Colonel Connard discovered that and rerouted us toward Bastogne, outside of Bastogne, and a little place called Neffe, Neffe, and Warden, Worden. So we were surrounded for the most part with a little bit of a gap between one of the glider units and the 506 Infantry Division. So we were surrounded for the most part, and we had little if any equipment because we had turned in most of it in that 5-day furlough period to get clean clothes, new this, new that, and refurbish this and refurbish that. And so we had to leave in a hurry with not all of this material returned to us. So we were depleted, so we gathered what we could from the 116th as quickly as we could.
And so you don't have what you need, and you're totally surrounded. So how did you hold?
Just the best we could with what we confiscated from any place we could find it. Well, we didn't use German weapons because that's too dangerous, but we had a little bit of artillery, and they broke up the artillery battalions into segments at different places and joined and rejoined them, so it looks like we had 10 times the number of people that we really had on artillery blastings. And we set up a defense, and I had taken out patrols after patrols after patrols, and the battalion wanted to know what was going on in front of us, so I was sent out with a patrol of 4 or 5 guys. I had a John Thomas as #1 scout and Arthur Texier right next to me, 10 yards behind, and then 1 or 2 guys behind me, and then the last man in the patrol was John W. Curtis, and he was a getaway man. He was to observe everything. This was an observation patrol, not to set up a firefight, but just to observe. So in case anything did happen, we were in trouble up there where I was, he would note things that were going on, and then he could escape and get away and get back. So we were at good military formation and spread out quite wild and broad area. The ground was semi-permafrost and patches of snow, and it's hard to dig into it. The Bastogne is in a valley, deep valley, and Neffe is a continuation of that valley. And later on we discovered, after the war, that there was a German sniper in a 5-story building that housed farm equipment. And he could see every one of us. And he is after me, because I'm leading the patrol, and he's going to try to shoot me beneath the ear and on top of the shoulder, the obligata. And once I'm hit there, you're through. You don't make any decisions, you're a dead man walking. So we were coming down the long slope of a hill, and we were perpendicular to a decomposed granite road. We got on the decomposed granite road and turned left and got to the fork in the road, and I sent John Thomas up the left fork, crawling and breaking through ice and through the bushes and the hedgerows. He wasn't doing too much progress, and I don't know what he could see up there, so I asked Arthur Texier, right next to me, to call him back, and he came back to me, and I sent him up the right fork of the road to get around to behind him. Well, in the meantime, the sniper had seen me, and he fired one, and he hit me just above the left knee. He thought my knee was my head, and he missed that, and he caught me in the knee. It was bleeding quite a bit. It nicked an artery, but it was so cold that I didn't notice it, except the blood was running into my boots. And I told Texier to give me a shot of morphine, because Lieutenant Bennett had given me 18 syrettes, and in case you need it, you got it. You could take it with you. So I had those, and I gave the 18 to Texier and said, give me a shot of morphine, and he did. And now I had to check that leg to see if it was broken. And just before I did that, I sent Texier out to the right to follow John Thomas with the 17 syrettes of morphine. And as I got up, I put my weight on that left knee. It was not broken, but my right arm came up in front of my face, and another shot fired, and it hit the radius of the right arm and took out about 6 inches of bone. My submachine gun dropped off, and I dropped it, and my helmet came off, and I dove toward a ditch and stayed there for a bit. John W. Curtis was in the back, way in the back, and evidently he got away and told what was happening up there in front. And later on, he came out and rescued me, which I needed. So it was getting toward dusk, and here I am with a morphine shot, and I was quite concerned about whether the Germans would send out a patrol to get me or set the haystack on fire. The machine gunners with the German tanks, they fired high, tracers high, red tracers and blue tracers high, way over our heads. So somebody in our group would say, "Oh, they're firing overhead, let's get up and move." They fired low then at the same time, and the battle sounds from the rifles would overpower the opposing sounds next to you, and you wouldn't know who was firing and what was firing, except that you were encouraged by the bravery of the guy that was on your right, because you like to know that he is standing there with you, and he's protecting you with his rifle. The guy on the left, he would have a machine gun or some other kind of equipment, and he would be firing, and both of those things give you courage and bravery. So you stayed right where you were, except that we were out on a patrol.
So were you evacuated after being wounded?
Well, John W. Curtis finally got in and told him what was happening. He volunteered to come out and get me, and he came up the road crouching and down real low, and I saw him right opposite the haystack and called him, and I said, "Okay, John, give me the butt of your rifle. You take the muzzle, and we'll push and pull all the way." And it took us about 45 to 50 minutes to get back to our lines. And we did, and we had a dickens of a time identifying ourselves before they started shooting us. And by that time, it was more than a dusk. It was getting dark. So we were picked up there and taken to Bastogne in the nunnery. And they put me on an operating table, and I told the surgeon I was hungry, so he said, "Get that man a peanut butter sandwich." and he ran a stick with a methylate on it through my arm to clear out some of the bone fragments. And while I was eating a peanut butter sandwich, I remember I was under morphine now, and so I had no pain at all.
So was that the end of the battle for you, or did you?
That was that was the end of the foxhole digging battleground for me, with arm wounds and leg wounds, and I was sent to the 121st Field Hospital, and from there I was sent to the American Embassy there, and by that time the wounds were infected, so they had to clear those up again. That they're going to send me to England. And then from England, they're going to ZI me. You know what ZI meant?
No.
Zone of Interior. Where's that? United States.
You're going home.
They're going to send me home. I refused to go. And the majors, I was lying in the bed, you'd have your armpits out and your arms over the blankets and the sheets. And he had the x-rays down the corner of the bed. You'd look at those and make a decision. And since I wasn't there, he wondered where I was, and he found me in another room with a small flat iron, ironing my shirt with a bad arm. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well," I told him I filled the air with sulfuric fumes of words that probably he'd never seen before, you know, because I didn't recognize his rank and file. And he said, "I'll have you out of here in 3 days." It took 5 days to get rid of me. And then I went to repo depots and took another 2 weeks to get back to the regiment that they had stopped at Alsace-Lorraine and Hertigan Forest, and they were doing some patrolling and fighting there, and then on to Berchtesgaden, so I met them in Berchtesgaden. Most of us guys that went through Toccoa, we had enough. We had 4 campaigns now, and that's enough. So we took the option of accumulating all of our points on an individual basis and decided to go home. So it depleted the 501 rather radically, but they brought in more recruits and more replacements to build it back up, and so they did German occupation duty, and we weren't about to do that kind of stuff anymore again in any wintertime in any place in Europe.